Alright guys, I'm sure you were all guessing this movie would be on my list somewhere. You might have not realized or figured out where it would be on my list, but almost every YouTube reviewer that loves both art films and blockbusters is eventually going to have this movie on their list, most likely. My number 10 so far is Avengers: Infinity War. Let's face it, when it comes to blockbusters and superhero movies, this was the big event that a lot of people were waiting for. This was several years in the making. Thanos is finally on the screen actually fighting. We've been building up this big baddie that's going to take on all of the superheroes, and we finally got that movie. This was the big event movie. Then again, the same could be said for any of the superhero movies that's more of an ensemble. Any of the Avengers movies or Captain America Civil War is less about the personal stories and more about, alright, we've developed all these superheroes, now let's have them fight, let's have them have this world-ending big event. That's what Infinity War is, and it's a blast watching, especially if you've been a fan of the MCU throughout the years. And I have to say, I have to appreciate the ambition of this film. Just getting all these characters together and being able to weave them into the story in a way that isn't confusing and isn't convoluted and isn't crowded was mind-boggling. And despite it being a movie where it is mainly just about a big event, there is actually story and character development with our main villain. And that's what I loved about it, and it made me love Thanos. Thanos is now one of my favorite villains of the MCU just because it actually developed him in this movie, and you can actually see where he's coming from. You may not agree with his methods, but you understand how he came about this way, what his motivations are, and why he's doing everything. Well, I guess that's what motivations are. And when it comes to these types of movies, it's always fun getting to see certain heroes interact with each other that normally don't interact with these movies. Just seeing those characters meet each other for the first time, interact, lead to many funny and really interesting moments. Alright, with our big blockbuster out of the way, we're now down to some of the more indie and artistic films. This one's an indie drama, kind of comedy, because I definitely did feel the comedy for the movie. It is Tully. Now Tully, it didn't come out Mother's Day, but we got it the day before Mother's Day. The week before Mother's Day, I think. And out of the two Mother's Day movies that we got, this was arguably the better Mother's Day movie. Or at least one that is relatable. Even though I'm a guy, I'm not a mother, I don't have any children, I could easily relate to our main character, to Charlize Theron's character. And some of the comedy within it is very dramatic because it's one of those things where the character is going crazy because of having to raise her children, and there's comedy in that and relatability to that, but you also realize, man, her life sucks. To be honest, I thought all the characters were developed well. I thought all the acting was great in the film. I love Charlize Theron's performance. And it was one of those movies where I'm expecting it to be a straightforward drama / comedy, and I actually was not expecting there to actually be a twist. And so when a twist happens, it really caught me off guard, and it's another one of those things that makes me love the film even more. Speaking of mothers that go crazy because of children, well, this one doesn't really go crazy because of her children. It's mainly her whole family, especially her mother, and a few other supernatural-like experiences. It's a horror movie. It's Hereditary. Now look, I understand that the majority of audience members don't like these type of horror movies, ones that are weird and depressing and just crazy. But I feel all the horror movies that I've seen so far from A24 or have been produced by A24, I've liked. I loved The Monster, and I loved It Comes at Night, and I love Hereditary. Now granted, some of the performances could possibly be considered over the top and kind of comical for some people, but it's just because of just how insane this movie is, just how insane it causes the characters to become. The crazy things that happen in this movie with the supernatural events and deaths and just the timing of it all, it makes sense why everyone just loses their mind. I loved the trailer for this movie. It got me excited, but I knew, all right, it's A24. I know what It Comes at Night was like. I know not to expect exactly what I see in the trailer. Expect something more than what you see. And I have to be honest, I was expecting it was going to be more like an Omen type thing with the girl having supernatural powers. Yeah, after that third act ended, my mouth dropped to the floor because I was not expecting what happened. A certain death happens and I was not expecting it. Granted, I'm sort of expecting it once the scene is actually happening, but before going into the movie, I didn't expect that to happen so quickly. Now, there are a few things that are keeping Hereditary from being even higher on the list for me, and keeping it from being one of my favorite horror movies from A24, because I love It Comes at Night a lot better, and that's because I love the mystery to It Comes at Night, and how you as the audience have to piece it together and understand with your interpretation. In Hereditary, it starts out that way, but as it gets towards the end, you realize, okay, this is really happening, this is the kind of movie it is, and there's plenty of horror movies like that. I'm not disliking Hereditary because of that, but it did so well at making you guess on whether Toni Collette's character is crazy and seeing things, or if there really is something supernatural. I think it did a really good balance and understanding of that mechanic. But then when it gets to the end, it's like, okay, yeah, it's all supernatural. Don't worry, we're just having crazy stuff now. And I get not every horror movie has to have an ending where it could go either way, and it's up to the viewer to decide, because a lot of people, especially genre fans, don't like that guessing at the end, don't like that abrupt ending and having to figure out and decide for themselves how it ends. But part of me did kind of feel like I wanted that with Hereditary, and I do feel that the scares towards the end are done in a way that could be kind of comical for some. In fact, the two ladies in front of me, two teenage ladies that went to see this movie, could not stop laughing when it came to the climax of the film. Which was kind of sad. I understand it because it's one of those types of horror elements that is so outlandish, so weird and out there. It's like finding the horror in the weird and the strange. And so that imagery could be considered funny to some people rather than actually scary. For me, it creeped me the hell out. Alright, I feel for those of you that love the artistic, more dramatic, really weird and strange horror movies, the ones that are unique, will probably hate me for having this particular horror movie higher than Hereditary. My number 7 is A Quiet Place. I still love It Comes at Night way better, and for me, A Quiet Place did feel like the kind of things that people, the normal people or the majority of people, wanted from It Comes at Night. And so if you hated It Comes at Night, chances are you loved A Quiet Place. And if you loved It Comes at Night, chances are you didn't like A Quiet Place. For me, I love both movies, but in very different ways. A Quiet Place is one of the more conventional horror movies with a monster out there, family trying to survive, family constantly getting into situations where the monster's hunting them and they have to be quiet. And Granted, some of the characters might be choosing choices that purposely get them in an intense situation so that the audience can be on the edge of their seat. But I do feel that almost all the decisions were completely understandable, judging from the characters, their emotional state, and their decision making. I think there's a few people that can point out some of their decisions as being dumb, but characters are not perfect people. Sometimes we make dumb mistakes, and a lot of the mistakes that they made and a lot of the choices that they made sense given the circumstances, I feel. I do feel the acting was really good. I think there was a really good, solid direction from John Krasinski. There's some really, truly intense, on the edge of your seat moments in this film that really affected me and really got me just tensing up. And while there is very little drama and very little drama revolving around the family unit, there's just enough for me to enjoy it and really care about the characters, and there's just enough world building that makes it feel smart, even though a lot of things could still be questioned and could be considered plot holes to some people. But I think there's just enough to make it just smart enough to be acceptable and above the norm when it comes to your traditional horror film. Alright, my number 6, I was glad we actually did get this in theaters, even if it was for 1 week, and even though it was a month late. My number 6 is Isle of Dogs. To be honest, all I really have to say is it's a Wes Anderson movie, and if you've seen any of his movies before, chances are you get a feeling of just what this movie is like. And what you're thinking of is probably exactly what this movie is, and if you like that, you are probably going to love this movie. I love the movie. There's just something about his style that I love when it comes to the camera, the very just sort of straight to the point type of dialogue that isn't like normal dialogue and wouldn't be how normal people speak, but there's something quirky and something unique about it. And there's just something I love about the whimsicalness and the quirkiness, despite all the moments where it's brutal and savage and crazy and bonkers. It's just the right amount of everything. Alright, my number 5 is another weird, trippy, depressing movie, science fiction movie, and I'm surprised it's not an A24 production. It's Annihilation. This really is a bizarre movie, and it takes a lot to really get interested and invested in, but for me, I was invested right away. I enjoyed the characters. There's a lot of really crazy, really unique science fiction stuff. It's a slow burning thriller, if you can call it a thriller. Even though there was a few things here and there that I might not have enjoyed as much, I feel that I loved every second of this film until it got to the end where it got a little too much and slow, but I understand why they did exactly what they did at the end. The framing device for it, where she's being interviewed, I could see how some people would be annoyed with that. It didn't really bother me that much. I do feel Ex Machina is better, and the reason I'm saying that is because it's the same director and writer, but Annihilation is really damn good, I feel. It's also probably responsible for the scariest scene that I've seen so far in theaters this year, and it has to do with a screaming bear. God damn it, that was freaking terrifying. Alright, with number 4, we're back to the fun, blockbuster, action, comedy, superheroes. It is Deadpool 2. Now, I really enjoyed the first Deadpool movie. I thought it was a blast, and it was very important to have an R-rated superhero film that is successful and is allowed to be just what it needs to be in order to really successfully imitate the comic books. Deadpool is a very specific type of character, and if you do it right, fans will love it. And Deadpool was done right. A couple of viewings every now and again makes me not like it as much, but I still love it, just not as much as I initially saw it in theaters. Deadpool 2 for me, I actually think that is the better of the two movies. I still love Deadpool. I love Deadpool 2 even more. It was funnier, the crazy satire in it. There is some moments of true drama in it that I enjoyed. The whole story I really thought was unique and fun. There's just so many elements in this film that I thought were done better in 2 than they were done in 1. My number 3 is Molly's Game, and yes, it's a 2017 movie, but it had its wide release in January of 2018. That's when I saw it. That's why I consider it a 2018. Not just because I saw it this year, but because I saw it because of it being a wide release in January of 2018. I won't talk too much about it because I actually did a full review of it. Maybe not a full review as in talking about the whole movie, but a review, a normal spoiler-free review. I love the story. It's based off a true story. I thought the writing was superb. And even though this is Aaron Sorkin's directorial debut, I thought he was a really good director. He's not as good of a director as I feel he is a writer. The writing in Molly's Game is still far stronger, but he is a really good writer, and he's written a lot of really great films. The characters were great, the acting was great. There's a few things here and there that are sort of hit and miss for me, but overall, I really enjoyed Molly's Game. Alright, my number 2 is probably, it might be my personal favorite of the year so far. I think there's 3 movies that could be considered my ultimate personal favorite movies of the year so far. This one's one of them. Annihilation is up there, and Isle of Dogs is up there. I think this one and those 2 are sort of tied for my personal favorites. But right now, my number 2 is First Reformed. Yes, another dark, depressing character piece that's produced by A24, but one that is done absolutely well and one that I was mesmerized through the entirety. I've always found Ethan Hawke to be a really amazing actor and really great even in the crappy movies that he's in. Ethan Hawke is one of my favorite performances of the year when it comes to this movie. There's so much that I love about this movie. The cinematography, even though I didn't get to see it in its entirety that much, because the projector I was seeing it in was a little off-center, and so part of the movie was being cut off on the top of the screen. But from what I saw in the aspect ratio and the directing, it was really damn good. The director that directed and wrote this movie is the same person who wrote such classics as Raging Bull and Taxi Driver. But he hasn't directed all that well usually. I mean, the last thing he directed before this, I believe, is Dog Eat Dog with Nicolas Cage and William Dafoe. Who would have known this was the same director? There's just so many things that's superb about this movie, and it's one of those movies you really do have to get into, because like I said, it's a depressing, dark character piece, and if you're not into that stuff, you're not going to be into this movie. But if you are, and if you're willing to give it a try, you might have a really great time seeing this movie. I mean, it's hard to say really great time because it's a really great time in a very different sort of way. Not the entertaining sort of like, oh, this is a fun movie sort of way, but entertaining in this is a really great direction, the art style, the cinematography, the acting, the characters, the development of the story, that kind of thing. I think the one little thing that might bring it down a notch when I see it a second time, or might even bring it up, but when I initially saw it, as the climax of the movie happens, this has the craziest escalation of a climax. One of the craziest I've ever seen in a movie, especially a movie like this. And I will say, even though I do expect these types of films to end abruptly, because it ends where it needs to, and we sort of, as the audience, figure it out later on in our own minds, this one ends more abruptly than I thought it would. Alright, my number 1 Now, to be fair, this one could be bumped down a little bit. I've only seen it once, and it's the only one that I've reviewed that I've actually given 5 stars to. I have more movies that I would give 5 stars to. I just haven't reviewed them yet. But this is the only one that I've actually reviewed and given 5 stars to, and that is Paddington 2. Look, it's really hard to argue that it's a greater film than something like First Reformed or something that's trying to speak artistically. This is just one of those really fun, well-executed family films that's charming, it's funny, it has a lot of elements that is really engaging to both older audiences and younger audiences. I think it's actually better than the first Paddington movie, and I did love the first Paddington movie. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the British charm, if it's the bear in itself, but there's just something great about these Paddington films that I just love, and I'm smiling almost the entire way through. This is one of those perfect family films that's great for adults, great for kids, doesn't skimp out on the actual story and some of the drama, but still has something lighthearted and fun, and just something great to watch. Again, it's not one of those important films you have to go out and see if you're a film lover, but there's just something about it that brings it really high on my list, because it's just one of those perfect family films. So those are currently my top 20 best films of the year so far from January to June of 2018. Out of those 6 months, out of the first 6 months of the year, what are your favorite movies so far? And if you like this video and you want to see more, please check out my other countdowns and movie reviews of this year, of last year, of whatever years I have available. And as always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this was Just My Opinion.